I may have just created the most off-meta build in the history of ESO that's actually powerful and really fun to play. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, HTM here, and this is the new unkillable Magicka Necromancer build. I've had various versions of this one on the channel in the past, but this is now updated for subclassing with a new theme focused around being an undead lich. This of course comes with plenty of skeletal minions and frost damage, but also includes you floating around the battlefield with a ton of damage reduction and self-healing while your pets and dots do all the work for you. This build is going to be great for most solo content in the game, and like I said, it's just different and really fun to play. As always, we'll go over everything you need to know to get started in this video, so let's jump right into it. Alright everybody, here we are back in ESO with a new build, sort of an updated build of a previous one I had done a long time ago. This is going to be our unkillable Magicka Necromancer build, now updated for subclassing. Basically, this is going to be best for solo content. It does pretty solid damage, but has a ton of survivability, allowing you to basically just kind of float around in place, deal a ton of dots and ground-based effects, and just watch everything die. The name I have for this build is also the LICH, going with kind of a lich-based theme for this one, and it's also updated for subclassing. So let's go ahead and buff up here real quick. I'll probably miss a few, but that should be good enough just to look at the basic stats here. Checking out the stat sheet, 33, almost 34k max Magicka. Lots of max health here, 28k max health, 13k max stamina. Good recoveries, though we really don't need much at all. You'll see why in a bit. And our weapon and spell damage does go up higher when we're fully buffed, and we'll obviously have some backbar buffs as well. So we'll be over 4k weapon and spell damage, about 50% crit chance. Look at those armor values as well, too. This is primarily a light armor build, but you can see we have a very good defensive stats, and even more through our skills, which we'll talk about too. So a very tanky setup here. 64 points into max Magicka is what you'll want for your attributes. You will want the Thief Mundus here just to maximize your crit chance. That's going to help a bit with damage. In terms of stats, something with max Magicka, max health, and a little bit of Magicka recovery is always good. In this case, I have Clockwork Citrus Fillet, but something like Witch Mother's Potent Brew, totally fine for this one as well. You see, I have a lot of other buffs as well that are available through some of our skills as well as set pieces. So we'll talk about those too. But in terms of other consumables, you can really use anything in terms of your potion. Now, I do have an armor potion right now, which is going to help for soloing more difficult content. That's what's really maxing out our armor, because we don't need the Magicka sustain at all, or even stamina sustain. So you can use something like armor potions if you want, heroism potions, or just basic Magicka potions. Totally up to you there for the potions on this build. And then for the race, I went with High Elf here. This has some really nice offensive bonuses and sustain. Spell recharge, for example, 625 Magicka or stamina back, whichever is the lowest. What's really good here is that when we channel an ability, we'll take an additional 5% less damage. You'll see how that stacks with some of our defensive buffs in a few minutes, and then we got the max Magicka and the weapon and spell damage. So High Elf is a really good choice for this. Dark Elf would be great. Even Khajiit, if you want to focus more on the crit damage and healing, that would be a nice option as well. So I think that covers the basics. Yeah, pretty quickly went through those. So let's talk about the gear sets next and where things get really interesting here. Like I said, I think this is going to be a damage over time focused build. So anything really on your front bar that's going to help with that dot damage is going to be best. So what I found to work really well is this set called Draugr Grip. This gives you max Magicka, gives you penetration, Magicka recovery, and then increases your damage done by 330, but reduces your healing received. So this basically buffs every single tick of damage over time, and any type of damage really. Since we have a lot of those damage ticks going out, this really works pretty well. Now, as a front bar set, we're going to run an Inferno Staff. That's important because it does buff our damage over time effects through the Destruction Staff passives. And then we're just going to run 3 more pieces on the body. Since remember, Staff is a 2-handed weapon, that counts for 2 bonuses. And then just 3. So I've got the Draugr Gloves, legs, and feet. And that's going to be max Magicka, all divines, if you can get those traits. But yeah, this is a really good set in terms of damage over time. Now, I did try a couple of other ones. If you have access to these, they'll be pretty close, though Draugr did do the most damage out of all of these. But other options would be Rune Carver's Blaze, for example. This has kind of better, I think, 2 through 4 piece stats. And it gives you an additional flame damage tick on your dots, but it only procs every 3rd damage tick. So it actually is a little bit less damage than you would think. But if you have access to this instead of Draugr, totally fine. It's about the same amount of overall damage. And then another nice option, which I know more people have access to, is the Deadly Strike set. Deadly Strike also boosts your damage over time attacks by 15%. So this does end up being quite a nice damage boost as well. If you have access to Deadly, you can run this exactly the same staff and then 3 pieces on the body. In terms of the staff type, again, Inferno Staff is generally going to be better because that buffs your dot effects. But you can run anything really. Lightning Staff, if you wanted to morph this into more of a heavy attack playstyle, I would recommend the Lightning Staff. If you want more defense, you could even run an Ice Staff, and you can hit those Ice Staff heavy attacks for a free damage shield. That's a really nice option when you're soloing as well. Let's talk about the back bar set now. So I am running a defensive set on the back bar, and this is, again, based on the Destruction Staff. This is called Winter's Respite, and this is a very nice healing and defensive option, giving you Magicka Recovery, Max Magicka. And then when in combat, you cast an ability that leaves an effect on the ground, and you get a very nice heal over time in an area. This is very strong and even has a high crit chance on this build, so you'll be getting those heal ticks to crit as well, giving you even more healing over time. What I've gone with here for the theme of the build, obviously, we're going to go with Ice Staff just to kind of boost that frost damage element on the Lich build. You do want Infused as the trait if you can, transmute that or whatever you have access to, and then the weapon and spell damage as your enchant there. Again, that's 2 pieces because it's a 2-handed weapon, so 2 bonuses there, and then just 1 on the body. So I've got the belt there for my 3rd piece, just 2 pieces on the jewelry, 2 rings here with Bloodthirsty with spell damage enchants. That's going to be our back bar set. So you can see we're running a back bar proc. We're running a front bar set. This leaves us with a lot of options. We are going to be using a full monster set on this build just to fill out the theme here. Iceheart's going to be really nice. If you're using a light armor set like Draugr or Rune Carver, I recommend you get medium pieces for your Iceheart monster set just to spread out those armor weights a little bit. So I've got the medium Iceheart helmet, medium Iceheart shoulders with Divines, Max Magicka on those. You can see this gives us a nice extra crit chance bonus, as well as a damage shield, which we're boosting with champion points, and even more frost damage in AoE, so that's really nice too. We even have room for a separate chest piece here, so you can run something like Armor of the Trainee. This is why my health is so high on this build, because I can run 1-piece Trainee for the 1-piece max health bonus. I can keep the health glyph on here. And then I get even more resources through Undaunted Metal. That gives you bonus up to 6% bonus health, magicka, and stamina if you're using all 3 armor weights possible. So this is a really nice option to go with for soloing, especially, like I said, for that extra health and also extra armor as well. And then if you've been following along, obviously that just leaves 1 more piece, which is going to be your option for the Mythic. Now, for most cases, Velothi Mage's Amulet is going to be really good on this build. This gives even more penetration, a bonus damage against monsters, and also you get Minor Force, which is a really important buff. You get that passively at all times without needing to get that buff from a separate skill. Now this is really nice. A lot of my subclassing builds are using Velothi just for that reason, because with subclassing we want to use as many class skills as we can. And so getting that Minor Force buff through a gear set like this is really helpful. Now, obviously, if you want to run this differently as like a heavy attack build, for example, this won't be quite as good because it does reduce the damage of your light and heavy attacks by 99%. So that's the only case where I wouldn't use this. If you want to kind of morph this over to a heavy attack build, then you can use something else, probably like Ring of the Pale Order for that extra bit of healing. That would work really well also. All right, so that is the gear setup. I do recommend you guys head over to the website, hacktheminotaur.com. I'll have the written build guide linked in the pinned comment down below, and I'll have several other sets listed, Frost themed or Lich themed sets, which you can use if you don't have access to what I showed in the video. I'll have several other options that you can pick up in the written guide. All right, let's jump into skills next, and especially talking about subclassing. So I mentioned that this is going to be a Necromancer build as sort of your base or your main class. That just kind of makes sense for this Lich style. With that, we're going to use Gravelord, obviously, as a starting skill line. This is really good in terms of damage and buffs. For example, Skeletal Arcanist. This gives you your major brutality and sorcery. It's going to be really important if you're not using something like the Oaken Soul Ring or Spell Power Potions. You need to get this buff somehow. So Skeletal Arcanist, a really good way to do that. We also have debuffs. So Unnerving Boneyard is going to reduce enemy armor and cause them to take more damage. This is a really important skill. And then Gravelord Sacrifice is perfect on this build because it increases not only our Necro damaging abilities, but any damage over time effect gets a 15% boost from having this active. It basically acts like a 20-second buff, so it's really easy to maintain. Of course, we've got the Glacial Colossus. That's going to be a really powerful ultimate. And then the passives here are really good as well for Gravelord. And now the second skill line, again, from the Necromancer class, Bone Tyrant is going to be really good for this type of playstyle as well, because this is our survivability and a little bit of utility as well. I really like Beckoning Armor now. This is actually a really great skill to use for any type of solo build, because you're getting not just major resolve, so your basic armor buff, but you're also getting minor resolve. So this is, what, about 9,000 total armor just from using this one skill. It's really good. But not only that, this basically brings in ranged enemies to you. Once they deal damage to you, they are basically thrown into combat with you. They're just kind of sucked in. And you'll see how good that is during the gameplay, because we're basically stationary or, floating around, and this is going to make those enemies, obviously put them in range from our damage over time effects. So that's really helpful. And then Ravenous Goliath can be really good if you're trying to solo more difficult content, because this boosts your health by a ton, 30k extra health for 20 seconds, but it also gives you sort of a heal over time effect. You deal AoE damage in the area and you heal for the same amount. So yeah, if I'm trying to solo something like, let's say that has a challenging wave of ads come in, then I might slot Ravenous Goliath instead of the Colossus, just because it's more of a good defensive option. So those are the Necromancer class skill lines. Now, in terms of subclassing, I really wanted to lean into that Lich theme. And so that's where I wanted a Frost-based skill line, and that's going to be Winter's Embrace. Now, I did sort of experiment with Ice Fortress. I think that the, Beckoning Armor. I think Beckoning Armor is a lot better than Ice Fortress for a couple reasons. Number one, we get Major Resolve and Minor Resolve. This one just gives the major version. You also get Minor Protection, but we can actually get passive Minor Protection from another skill line. The only advantage here is it just kind of has a longer duration, but then that kind of messes up our rotation. So didn't really go with Ice Fortress, but I did really like our two damaging Frost abilities here. Winter's Revenge, we're going to throw this on the back bar as kind of a back bar AoE dot. It's a snare. You can apply the chilled status effect. So this is a really good ability. And then we're going to throw Arctic Blast onto the front bar for even more Frost damage in an AoE, more chance to apply the chilled status effect, and a nice stun that happens after 3 seconds. So those are going to be our main two abilities for the Winter's Embrace skill line. You could use the ultimate here too if you wanted to. You could morph this into either version. If you didn't like the Necromancer ultimates, then you could do that as well. That kind of rounds out the build in terms of the skill lines. Now, in terms of the bar slots and how that looks, let's go ahead and go through it, talking about the front bar first. Gravelord Sacrifice, we talked about this. This is a nice buff to our damage over time effects. This is also where we're putting Arctic Blast. I forgot to mention too, this can heal you for a ton, like 14, 15k heal if it crits, but you need to be away from enemies. So if you are retreating, if you're like getting away from a group of enemies, make sure you have a little bit of distance. If you don't hit anybody with the AoE effect, then you do get the burst heal as well, which is kind of good for more challenging content. Next up, we have a really interesting ability from the Psijic Order skill line, and this is kind of where I went with the floating lich theme. This is called Introspection. Like I said, it's from the Psijic Order skill line, and if you've never seen this, basically it's a channeled ability or almost a buff in a sense, because it gives you a heal over time. It gives you Magicka and stamina back, so we really don't need anything in terms of sustain on this build. And also in terms of the Psijic Order passives, this gives us a ton of damage reduction. Let's go ahead and look at this here quickly. Psijic Order skill line. Here's what the skill looks like. So you're getting health and Magicka and stamina every 1 second. The health value can crit. You can crit heal with this, so that does go up quite a bit. Maintaining the channel increases the health restored by 10% up to 50%. So it is a very big heal. And then it's a toggle as well. Now, where the damage reduction comes into play is not through the ability, but actually through the passives here. Specifically this one, Deliberation. While you're casting or channeling a Psijic Order ability, you reduce your damage taken by 30%. So that's really like one of the biggest damage reduction bonuses in the game. And so that's why in the gameplay, you'll see me, just throw down, put all my dots on the ground, and then I'm just hovering in combat while my dots do all the damage. I'm also taking 30% less damage. Now we're stacking even more damage reduction on top of that, which we'll see. That's kind of the key ability. When you're not casting all of those skills, you're floating and getting the damage reduction, the healing, and the sustain. So that's how that works. What else? On the front bar, we have more like just passive abilities, really. So making this build very easy. Inner Light comes from the Mages Guild skill line. This simply gives us a ton of max Magicka, and then also our Major Savagery and Prophecy buff. Also passively, so that's increasing our critical chance. It's really good to have. Another passive ability is going to be Revealing Flare. This comes from the support skill line, so that's the PvP skill line. What this does, you don't cast it. Again, it's passive, but you gain major protection for having this slotted on your front bar. So that's a 10% damage reduction there. And then we have even one more damage reduction for our ultimate. That's again coming from the Psijic Order. Temporal Guard is going to be our front bar ultimate, and that's giving us minor protection. So we're stacking the minor, the major protection, and the unique damage reduction from the Psijic Order passive, all while we're on that front bar. Really, again, just helping to reduce the incoming damage and giving us tons of healing and sustain. Back bar time, let me showcase those really quick. This is where most of our class abilities are found. Other than this one, of course, Blockade of Frost comes from the Destruction Staff skill line. You want to morph this to Blockade for the extra duration, 15 seconds. This really is just to proc your damage glyph on the back bar, that weapon and spell damage infused glyph, giving you a ton more damage. So make sure you recast this every 15 seconds. Along with that, we've got Winter's Revenge. That's from the Winter's Embrace skill line. We talked about that. And then our Necromancer skills. Unnerving Boneyard, that's our AoE, Major Breach, and Minor Vulnerability. Again, all of these do frost damage. Then we've got our Skeleton giving us the Major Brutality and Sorcery. And then we have Beckoning Armor, again, giving us tons of resistances. And then you can put your ultimate, your active ultimate really here. Glacial Colossus if you want more damage, or Ravenous Goliath if you want a more defensive option. But that's really it in terms of abilities. And I tried to keep it as simple as possible too. So for your rotation, just to kind of showcase it quickly, and then you guys can watch the gameplay as well. I'm going to start on the back bar with those 3 dots. Just going to cast all of those. That's going to proc your extra healing when you're in combat as well for some increased survivability. And then you have the Skeleton and then the Beckoning Armor. So you can cast those in order to get your damage, to get your damage buff, and then your survivability. Then you're going to bar swap to the front bar, cast your 2 other buffs here, and then simply float in that introspection buff until stuff starts to run off on the back bar. Swap back, recast. Obviously, if you have an ultimate ready, you can cast that too. Maintain your front bar buffs, those 2 abilities, and then we're just floating around, watching everything die. So I'll put some gameplay here. It is super simple. Like I said, basically, you just want to cast all your dots in an area, try to bring enemies into that area, and then stuff is just going to start taking a ton of damage from those dots. And like I said, you don't really have to do anything Now, in terms of more advanced tips, do watch out for like heavy attacks from bosses because they can break through your meditate and they will stun you and knock you down still. So you will have to break that meditate in order to block heavy attacks. That's basically the one thing that you need to watch out for, is anything that can stun you will still stun you when you're meditating. So keep that in mind. Also, make sure that you're light attacking at least between every ability, especially on the back bar, because you need to do that to generate ultimate. I know this build is super simple, but if you're not light attacking, especially since you have so much time where you're just floating around meditating, you will stop generating ultimate unless you've light attacked before you go into that floating meditation. So make sure you maintain those light attacks. Now, obviously, this build isn't going to be great for all kinds of content. It really works best when you can let the enemies come to you and you don't have to move around too much. If you are in a different combat scenario where you're moving around a lot, then I would probably try to switch this up into more of like a heavy attack focus build. And instead of channeling meditate, you can just heavy attack as you move around and while your dots are still doing damage. Now, we talked about you might want to switch up your mythic if you are doing heavy attacks. But the other thing you can do, which I also talked about, is just put on a frost destruction staff, a frost staff for your front bar for those kinds of fights. And even though it won't do a ton of damage because Velothi nerfs your heavy attack damage, you'll still get a huge damage shield from using a frost staff, and that can help you a lot with surviving more difficult, boss encounters, or if you're trying to solo a dungeon or something like that. So basically, be flexible with it and you can make it work. But let's quickly check out champion points here. Again, these will be in the written guide. I'll have these listed out for 300, 600, 900, and 1200 champion points. So there should be a breakdown there for whatever level range that you're in. And then let's just go over the slotted stars. So for in the green tree, we've got Steed's Blessing. Moving over to Master Gatherer, Gifted Rider, and Warmount. In the blue tree, we're going to start with Biting Aura and Thaumaturge. These will give you a nice increase to your dot damage and your AoE damage. And then Fighting Finesse for some more crit damage and crit healing, along with Wrathful Strikes. Finally, for the red tree, we're going to pick up Rejuvenation, Fortified, Boundless Vitality, and then I would recommend Bastion here for your 4th slotted star. This is going to help with the shield from Iceheart. Even, I forgot to mention, we get a free damage shield when blocking on the front bar. That's through the Sigic Order passives as well, and Bastion does boost that one also. Then if you're curious about the outfit style here, this is actually a costume, I believe. Yep, that's going to be the Periite Skeeve Master costume from the Orcrest City Public Dungeon. Hey everybody, just a quick note that if you're liking the new subclassing builds for ESO, I'm also releasing even more for our Tier 2 channel members called the Elite Squad, like our updated unkillable stamina Necromancer build called the Death Knight. This is one of my favorites, with massive AoE damage, plus insane survivability and self-healing. This is going to be great for soloing dungeon bosses, world bosses, and world events, and even some trials bosses. Plus we have our new Golden Saint build for the Stamina Templar, combining Holy and Fire magic, and our unique subclassing Druid build, also a ton of fun to play. And all of these, of course, are made to incorporate subclassing to create some truly amazing off-meta themed builds that basically feel like you're playing a completely new class in the Elder Scrolls Online. Members of our Tier 2 Elite Squad can unlock these builds right now, along with dozens of other members-only builds and guides. So if you're interested in supporting the channel, it really is the best way to do that because you get a truckload of bonus content, not to mention early access to videos and members-only Discord. Just make sure to select the Elite Squad option if you're interested. And to get started, just click on the join button down below or the membership link in the description of this video to see our complete library of members-only builds and guides. Huge shout out as always to our channel members who make this channel possible. I truly could not do what I do without you, so thanks again, and thanks to all of you for watching this video. I hope you're doing well, stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next one.